You're not stuck because life is against you. You're stuck because your inner world has been quietly agreeing with the version of reality you keep trying to escape. And the moment that truth lands properly, it changes how you look at everything you call circumstance, because it stops feeling like something outside of you is fully in control. What you'll realize by the end of this is simple but uncomfortable. Your experience of life is never just what is happening, it is what is happening filtered through you, and that filter is doing more work than the situation itself. Before going deeper, stay with this idea with full attention, because if you understand it clearly, you stop waiting for life to change first and start noticing where your real influence has always been operating in silence. Most people assume their circumstances are the main cause of how they feel. If life is smooth, they feel light. If life is difficult, they feel heavy. So naturally, they start believing the outside world is what controls their inner state. But what is rarely noticed is that the same situation can be experienced in completely different ways by different people, even when nothing about the situation itself changes. That difference is not in the event, it is in the interpretation of the event, and interpretation is shaped by what is already happening inside a person before they even respond. Thoughts, emotional habits, past experiences, and expectations all create an internal filter that quietly decides what something means before logic even steps in. This is why changing external conditions alone does not always change how life feels. A person can move to a better place, meet new people, or change their environment, but still carry the same inner reactions with them. And because those inner reactions stay familiar, life slowly starts feeling similar again. Even in a different setting, the mind also tends to reinforce its existing patterns. If someone is already feeling uncertain inside, they naturally start noticing more uncertainty around them. Not because life suddenly changed, but because attention is guided by internal state. In the same way, someone who feels more stable internally tends to notice more possibilities, even in the same environment. Nothing outside has changed, but what is being noticed has shifted. This is where most confusion starts. People try to fix the outer situation first, thinking it will automatically fix the inner feeling. But the inner feeling is often the lens through which the outer situation is experienced in the first place. So when that lens stays the same, even improved circumstances can still feel emotionally unchanged over time. There is also a quiet pattern that happens when someone constantly waits for external change before allowing themselves to feel better. The mind starts placing peace in the future. It creates a belief that relief is always something that comes later. Because of this, the present moment is never fully experienced, it is only endured while waiting for something else to shift. Over time, this creates a cycle where attention is always pulled toward what is missing. Even when progress happens, it does not fully register emotionally because the focus is still anchored in lack. So life feels like it is always almost there, but never fully satisfying. When attention begins turning inward instead of only outward, something important starts to shift. A person begins noticing not just what is happening, but how they are reacting to it. That small gap between event and reaction is where awareness begins to grow. Instead of instantly becoming the reaction, there is a moment of recognition, and that recognition changes the experience slightly. At first, this awareness feels subtle. It is not dramatic, but over time, it reduces the feeling of being completely controlled by circumstances. A challenge is still a challenge, but it does not automatically define everything. There is a little more space to respond instead of only react. This is where control begins to shift, not by changing everything outside, but by becoming aware of what is happening inside during the experience. Thoughts are noticed more clearly. Emotional patterns become easier to recognize. Automatic reactions start feeling less absolute and more observable. If you are following this closely, take a moment here to subscribe, because the deeper part of this understanding only becomes useful when it is remembered consistently, not just heard once. As awareness increases, a person starts seeing how often the same thoughts repeat in different situations. Worries that feel new are often familiar patterns in disguise. Doubts that appear suddenly are usually long-standing internal habits. And because these patterns repeat, they start shaping emotional responses in predictable ways. Once this becomes visible, the idea of circumstances having total control begins to weaken. Not because circumstances stop mattering, but because it becomes clear they are being interpreted through an internal system that is already active before anything happens externally. And when that realization settles in properly, life starts feeling less like something happening randomly to a person and more like something being experienced through a state that can gradually be understood, observed, and changed over time through awareness and consistency. Most people believe reality is shaped only by actions, luck, or circumstances. They wake up every day reacting to the outside world without realizing something much deeper is happening beneath the surface. Long before an experience appears physically, it usually exists as an internal assumption. The way a person silently sees themselves begins influencing their decisions, emotions, reactions, and even the opportunities they notice. This is why two people can walk through almost identical situations and still create completely different outcomes in life. One expects rejection and notices every sign of distance. Another expects respect and naturally behaves with confidence. Their assumptions quietly shape the reality they experience. An assumption is not just a thought that appears once in your mind. It is a belief repeated so often that it starts feeling natural. Most assumptions are formed over years through experiences, conversations, memories, and emotional patterns. Some people assume they are always unlucky. Others assume they are hard to love. Some assume success belongs to other people, not them. These beliefs may not always be spoken out loud, but they operate constantly in the background like invisible instructions guiding perception and behavior. Eventually, life starts reflecting those instructions back. Think about someone who constantly assumes people will ignore them. Even before entering a room, their energy changes, their body language becomes closed, their tone becomes uncertain. They may avoid eye contact without noticing it. Because of this, people respond differently to them, which then strengthens the original belief. The person walks away saying, "See, nobody notices me," without realizing their assumption helped create the experience. This cycle happens every day in small and powerful ways. On the other hand, someone who assumes they belong in the room behaves differently without forcing it. They speak more openly, they smile naturally, they are relaxed because acceptance already feels normal to them internally. People respond to that energy. Opportunities feel easier around them. It almost looks like luck from the outside, but often it begins with a different inner assumption. The mind is always searching for evidence to confirm what it already believes. If someone assumes life is unfair, they notice disappointment more intensely than opportunities. If someone assumes they are capable, they focus more on growth than failure. Reality starts organizing itself around dominant beliefs because those beliefs influence attention, emotional state, and behavior. This does not mean every event in life is fully controlled by thought alone, but assumptions strongly shape how people experience and respond to life. Many people unknowingly spend years repeating assumptions that hold them back. They say things like, "People always leave," "Nothing ever works out for me," or "I'm just not confident." At first, these may seem harmless, but repeated statements slowly become identity. The subconscious mind listens carefully to repetition, especially when emotion is attached. Over time, the mind begins treating those statements as truth. Once something feels true internally, the person starts living as if it is true externally. This is why changing assumptions can feel uncomfortable at first. The brain naturally resists unfamiliar identities. If someone has spent years assuming they are unworthy, suddenly thinking positively for one day will feel unnatural. The old identity tries to pull them back because familiarity feels safe, even when it creates suffering. That is why real change usually requires consistency rather than temporary motivation. A person shifting their assumptions must begin observing their internal dialogue honestly, not with judgment but with awareness. The way people speak to themselves matters deeply because those quiet inner conversations eventually influence emotional patterns and behavior. Someone who constantly criticizes themselves creates emotional tension inside their own mind. Over time, that tension affects confidence, relationships, and decision-making. But when someone begins replacing destructive assumptions with healthier ones, their internal world slowly changes. This process is not about pretending problems do not exist. It is about recognizing that assumptions influence perception more than most people realize. A person who assumes growth is possible reacts differently to setbacks than someone who assumes failure is permanent. One sees obstacles as temporary lessons. The other sees them as proof they should give up. The external situation may look similar, but the internal assumption changes the direction completely. Human beings often underestimate how much identity affects action. Someone who assumes they are disciplined does not struggle with every decision because discipline already feels like part of who they are. Someone who assumes they are always lazy creates internal resistance before even beginning a task. Identity shapes behavior quietly and consistently. That is why lasting transformation usually happens at the level of self-concept first. The interesting part is that assumptions can be changed intentionally over time. The mind is flexible. New beliefs can become natural through repetition, emotional reinforcement, and consistent focus. This is why athletes mentally rehearse success before competitions. It is why confident people often visualize positive outcomes naturally. The brain responds strongly to repeated emotional imagery, whether positive or negative. When someone repeatedly imagines themselves succeeding, speaking confidently, or living peacefully, the mind slowly becomes more familiar with that version of reality. Familiarity reduces resistance. Eventually, the person starts acting differently without forcing every movement. Their emotional state shifts, their decisions improve, their reactions become calmer. Small external changes begin appearing because the internal foundation has changed first. People often search for dramatic external solutions while ignoring the beliefs operating inside them every day. They change environments, relationships, or goals, but carry the same assumptions into every new situation. Then they wonder why similar patterns repeat. A person who deeply assumes they are unworthy may continue attracting unhealthy dynamics until that assumption changes internally. The outer experience often follows the inner pattern. This does not mean life becomes perfect the moment assumptions change. Challenges still exist, difficult moments still happen. But the way a person interprets and responds to those moments transforms significantly. Someone with healthier assumptions recovers faster from setbacks because they no longer see temporary struggles as proof of personal failure. Their mindset creates resilience. The strongest assumptions are usually the ones connected to identity. Statements beginning with "I am" carry emotional power because the subconscious mind treats identity seriously. When people constantly repeat negative labels about themselves, those labels slowly influence reality through behavior and expectation. But when someone begins building assumptions rooted in confidence, peace, growth, or worthiness, they create a different emotional environment inside themselves. Over time, that internal environment influences everything else. Reality is often less random than it appears. The beliefs people carry quietly shape what they notice, expect, tolerate, pursue, and create. Assumptions act like invisible filters through which life is experienced. Change the filter consistently enough, and the experience itself begins changing too. Most people think manifestation is mainly about repeating words, visualizing pictures in the mind, or staying positive all day. But what truly influences a person's inner state is emotion. Feelings leave a much deeper impression on the mind than words alone. Someone can repeat affirmations for hours, but if fear, doubt, or frustration quietly dominate underneath, those emotions usually become stronger than the words being spoken. Emotion is what gives thoughts weight. It is what makes certain beliefs feel real and others feel distant. Think about how memories work. People rarely remember every detail of ordinary days, but they remember moments connected to strong feelings. A single emotional experience can stay in the mind for years because emotion creates intensity. The subconscious mind responds to that intensity. That is why emotionally charged experiences often shape beliefs more powerfully than logic ever can. If a person constantly feels anxious about the future, that emotional state slowly becomes familiar. Over time, the mind starts expecting stress as normal. The person may wake up already feeling pressure before anything even happens during the day. In contrast, someone who regularly experiences calm confidence begins approaching life differently. Their emotional state changes the way they interpret situations, communicate with people, and react under pressure. Feelings influence behavior in subtle ways that most people do not notice immediately. Someone who feels worthy naturally carries themselves differently than someone who feels insecure. They speak with more certainty, they make decisions faster, they stop over-explaining themselves constantly. None of this is usually forced. It comes from the emotional identity they live in every day. This is why emotion matters so much in personal transformation. The subconscious mind learns through repetition and feeling. A thought repeated with strong emotion becomes believable faster than a thought repeated mechanically. If someone says, "I am confident," but internally feels embarrassment or self-doubt every time they say it, the emotional signal becomes mixed. The mind focuses more on the feeling than the words themselves. People often underestimate how much their daily emotional patterns shape their reality over time. A person who constantly feels rejected may unintentionally expect rejection everywhere. They may overanalyze messages, assume negative intentions, or become emotionally distant before others even have the chance to connect with them. Their feelings influence their perception, and perception influences experience. On the other hand, someone who feels emotionally secure behaves differently even in uncertain situations. They do not panic as quickly, they do not seek validation constantly. Their calm emotional state allows clearer thinking and healthier responses. Over time, this creates different outcomes in relationships, work, and personal growth. The body also responds strongly to emotion. Fear tightens muscles, changes breathing patterns, and increases tension. Confidence relaxes the body and creates openness. Emotional states are not only mental experiences. They affect physical energy, posture, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Other people often respond to these signals without consciously realizing it. This is why emotions influence social experiences so deeply. Many people try to force positive thinking while ignoring the emotions underneath. They suppress sadness, frustration, or fear instead of understanding them. But suppressed emotion usually does not disappear. It continues operating quietly in the background. Real emotional change happens through awareness and gradual shifting, not denial. For example, someone trying to build confidence cannot simply pretend insecurity never existed. They must slowly create new emotional experiences that feel safe, empowering, and believable. Confidence grows when the mind repeatedly experiences proof that it can handle situations successfully. Small emotional wins matter because they begin changing the emotional identity of the person. Visualization works similarly. It is not only about seeing an image in the mind, it is about emotionally connecting to the experience. If someone imagines achieving a goal while genuinely feeling gratitude, excitement, or peace, the experience becomes more impactful internally. The brain responds to emotionally meaningful imagery much more strongly than emotionally empty repetition. This does not mean a person must feel perfect every moment. Human emotions naturally change throughout life. Some days feel inspiring while others feel heavy. The important part is recognizing which emotional states become dominant over time. Temporary fear is normal. Living permanently in fear creates different patterns. People who constantly focus on what they lack often strengthen emotions of absence. They keep emotionally rehearsing disappointment without realizing it. Their attention stays fixed on what is missing, which reinforces frustration. But when someone begins focusing more on growth, appreciation, possibility, or progress, their emotional atmosphere changes gradually. This shift affects motivation too. A person emotionally connected to hope usually takes more action than someone emotionally connected to hopelessness. Feelings influence energy. Energy influences consistency. Consistency influences results. Many external outcomes begin internally through emotional patterns people repeat daily. There is also a difference between surface emotion and deeper emotional identity. Surface emotions change quickly. Someone may feel temporarily excited after watching a motivational video, but deeper emotional identity is what returns afterward. Does the person still emotionally see themselves as capable, or do they return immediately to self-doubt once inspiration fades? Long-term change happens when emotional identity begins shifting consistently, when peace starts feeling more natural than chaos, when confidence feels more familiar than fear, when self-respect becomes emotionally normal instead of uncomfortable. These changes often happen slowly through repetition, awareness, and experience. People sometimes believe emotions are irrational or unimportant compared to logic, but emotions shape many daily decisions more than logic alone. Fear can stop someone from taking opportunities even when the logical choice is clear. Shame can keep someone silent even when they deserve to speak honestly. Emotional conditioning influences behavior constantly. This is why healing emotional patterns can change life direction significantly. Someone who learns to emotionally feel safe expressing themselves may suddenly form healthier relationships. Someone who emotionally releases constant fear of failure may finally pursue goals they avoided for years. The external changes often begin after emotional shifts happen internally. The emotional state a person repeatedly returns to becomes part of their identity. If stress becomes normal, the body and mind adapt to stress. If gratitude becomes more familiar, the mind starts noticing more positive experiences naturally. The brain strengthens what it practices emotionally. One of the most powerful things a person can do is become more conscious of the emotions they rehearse every day, not judging them harshly but observing them honestly. Every repeated feeling teaches the mind something about reality. Over time, those emotional lessons shape expectations, reactions, and experiences. Emotion gives life meaning. It influences memory, connection, motivation, confidence, and perception. Thoughts may begin the process, but feelings often determine whether those thoughts truly take root. When emotion and belief align consistently, people begin changing from the inside first. And once the inner emotional world shifts deeply enough, external behavior and experiences often begin changing naturally alongside it. One of the biggest reasons people feel mentally exhausted is because they spend most of their lives chasing success, chasing attention, chasing validation, chasing relationships, chasing approval, and constantly feeling like happiness exists somewhere outside of themselves. The problem with this mindset is not ambition itself. Wanting growth is natural. The deeper issue begins when a person emotionally places their sense of worth in something they believe they do not yet have. The moment this happens, life starts feeling like a constant struggle to become enough. Many people wake up every day feeling incomplete without realizing it. They think the next relationship will finally make them feel valuable. They think more money will suddenly remove all insecurity. They think recognition from others will finally bring peace. But even after reaching certain goals, many still feel empty because the internal identity never truly changed. They achieve something externally while still feeling lacking internally. This is where the difference between chasing and embodying becomes important. Chasing comes from the feeling that something is missing right now. Embodying comes from developing the inner state of the person you want to become before external proof fully arrives. One energy feels desperate and tense, the other feels grounded and certain. People may not always notice this difference consciously, but it changes behavior, emotions, and decision-making in powerful ways. Think about someone constantly chasing validation in relationships. They may overthink every message, seek reassurance repeatedly, or become anxious when attention changes slightly. Their emotional state depends heavily on external reactions. Even if they try to appear confident outwardly, internally they feel unstable because they are always searching for confirmation that they are worthy. Now compare that to someone who embodies self-respect and emotional security. They still care about relationships, but they do not lose themselves trying to earn basic validation. Their confidence does not disappear every time another person becomes distant. They approach connection differently because their identity is not built entirely around external approval. The same pattern appears in almost every area of life. A person chasing success often feels stressed even while making progress. Nothing feels enough because they constantly move the finish line. Their mind says, "I'll finally feel good when I achieve this next thing." But once they reach it, the feeling fades quickly because the inner emptiness remained untouched. They were pursuing success from a state of lack rather than embodying fulfillment internally. Someone embodying success behaves differently. They still work hard, but their emotional identity is not built on desperation. They carry themselves with more calmness because they already see themselves as capable and valuable during the process, not only after reaching a goal. This inner shift changes the experience completely. Embodying does not mean pretending to have something physically when you do not. It means developing the mindset, emotional state, and habits that align with the version of yourself you are becoming. A person who embodies confidence does not wait for perfect circumstances before acting confidently. A person embodying discipline does not wait to feel motivated every day. They start practicing the identity first. This idea becomes powerful because identity influences action naturally. People act according to who they believe they are. Someone who deeply identifies as healthy eventually makes different choices than someone who constantly labels themselves as lazy or undisciplined. Someone who identifies as capable approaches challenges differently than someone who assumes failure before even trying. Many people unknowingly delay growth because they believe confidence, happiness, or worthiness must be earned externally first. They say things like, "I'll feel confident when I become successful," or "I'll value myself once others value me." But waiting for the outside world to create inner stability often leads to emotional dependence. The person remains trapped in constant pursuit. Embodying changes the direction entirely. Instead of asking him, "How do I get this?" the focus becomes, "Who am I becoming?" That question creates a deeper transformation because it shifts attention from external chasing toward internal development. For example, if someone wants financial growth, embodying abundance may involve developing responsibility, patience, long-term thinking, and emotional control around money. If someone wants healthier relationships, embodying love may involve emotional maturity, honesty, self-respect, and better communication. The focus stops being only about receiving outcomes and starts becoming about personal alignment. This also changes emotional energy significantly. Chasing often creates anxiety because the mind constantly fears loss or failure. The person feels emotionally attached to outcomes controlling their happiness. Embodying creates more emotional steadiness because identity no longer depends entirely on external results. People are naturally drawn toward individuals who feel secure within themselves. Confidence, calmness, and authenticity create a different presence than desperation or constant approval seeking. Someone embodying self-worth usually communicates differently without even trying. They become less reactive, less needy, and more emotionally balanced. This does not mean becoming emotionless or never wanting anything. It simply means desires stop controlling identity. A person can still pursue goals passionately while remaining emotionally grounded. They can want growth without feeling worthless in the present moment. Many people misunderstand this concept and assume embodying means doing nothing while waiting for life to change magically. In reality, embodying often leads to stronger action because the person stops wasting energy on fear and overthinking. Their decisions become clearer. Their confidence becomes more natural. Their actions become more consistent because they are no longer operating from panic. A person constantly chasing tends to force things. They obsess over timelines, compare themselves endlessly, and emotionally collapse when results take time. But someone embodying trust understands that growth often happens gradually. They focus more on becoming aligned internally rather than desperately controlling every external detail. This shift also affects self-talk deeply. Chasing creates inner conversations filled with pressure. Why am I behind? What if I fail? What if I never get there? Embodying sounds different internally. I am growing, I am learning, I am becoming someone stronger every day. The emotional impact of these internal conversations becomes significant over time. Repeated thoughts shape emotional identity, and emotional identity influences daily behavior. People often believe transformation begins after external success appears, but in many cases, transformation begins internally long before visible results arrive. The person starts thinking differently, responding differently, and carrying themselves differently. Small changes in identity gradually create larger changes in life direction. The truth is, constantly chasing can keep a person emotionally disconnected from the present moment. They become so focused on what they lack that they forget to develop the version of themselves capable of sustaining what they want. Embodying brings attention back to inner growth, emotional stability, and self-concept. The external world matters, but internal identity shapes how people move through that world. When someone stops living in constant emotional pursuit and starts embodying the qualities they admire, life begins feeling less forced. Their energy changes, their behavior changes, their relationships change, and often opportunities begin appearing more naturally because they are no longer operating entirely from fear, insecurity, or desperation. Most people spend years trying to change their habits, improve their circumstances, or reach new goals without realizing that the deepest force behind their behavior is identity. The way a person sees themselves quietly controls many of their decisions every single day. Even when someone genuinely wants change, they often return to familiar patterns because their identity has not changed yet. Human beings naturally act in alignment with who they believe they are. This is why lasting transformation feels difficult for so many people. They try to change actions while still carrying the same self-image internally. A person may want confidence, but if they still identify as insecure deep down, their behavior eventually returns to old patterns. Someone may want success, but if they secretly believe they are not capable enough, they may hesitate, procrastinate, or avoid opportunities without fully understanding why. Identity is powerful because the mind constantly works to remain consistent with it. People usually protect the image they have of themselves even when that image limits them. If someone has spent years saying, "I'm not disciplined," the brain begins treating that statement as truth. Then every time they try building better habits, internal resistance appears because the new behavior feels unfamiliar to their identity. This is why temporary motivation rarely creates lasting change. Motivation can inspire action for a short time, but identity determines consistency. A person who identifies as healthy naturally makes different choices than someone who constantly labels themselves as unhealthy or lazy. The first person does not need to fight themselves constantly because their behavior aligns with how they already see themselves. Think about how often people describe themselves with fixed labels. Some say, "I'm shy," "I'm unlucky," "I'm bad at relationships," or "I always fail at this." These statements may sound harmless because they are repeated casually, but over time they become internal programming. The mind starts filtering experiences through those identities. Eventually, behavior adjusts to match the belief. For example, someone who believes they are socially awkward may enter conversations already expecting discomfort. Their body language tightens, their confidence drops, they overanalyze everything they say. Because of this, social interactions become harder, which then reinforces the identity even more. The cycle continues until the person begins questioning the identity itself, rather than only focusing on the behavior. On the other hand, someone who sees themselves as socially capable approaches conversations differently. Even if they are nervous sometimes, they do not interpret nervousness as proof that something is wrong with them. Their identity allows them to recover faster from awkward moments because they are not constantly reinforcing a negative label about themselves. Identity affects emotional reactions too. A person who identifies as emotionally strong handles challenges differently than someone who identifies as powerless. Difficult situations may still hurt both people, but their interpretation changes. One sees obstacles as temporary experiences to work through. The other sees obstacles as confirmation that life is against them. This is why identity influences results so deeply. It shapes not only behavior, but perception, emotional resilience, confidence, and decision-making. People often believe their actions create identity, but identity and action constantly influence each other. The more someone repeats certain behaviors, the stronger that identity becomes. At the same time, the stronger the identity becomes, the easier those behaviors feel. Many people unknowingly create identities based on past experiences instead of present potential. A person who failed in the past may begin identifying as a failure. Someone rejected in relationships may start identifying as unlovable. But experiences are not always permanent definitions of identity. They are moments, not complete descriptions of who someone is. The danger comes when temporary experiences become lifelong labels. Once a label becomes emotionally accepted, the mind starts defending it. This happens because the brain prefers familiarity, even when familiarity creates suffering. A person may consciously want change while subconsciously holding on to an old identity because it feels known and safe. Changing identity requires more than positive thinking for a few days. It involves repeated emotional reinforcement, consistent behavior, and awareness of internal dialogue. The way people speak about themselves matters because repeated language shapes self-perception over time. Someone constantly insulting themselves internally weakens confidence little by little without realizing it. A healthier identity begins forming when people start becoming more intentional about how they see themselves. This does not mean pretending to be perfect or ignoring weaknesses. It means refusing to reduce your entire identity to your worst moments. Growth becomes easier when the internal image shifts from limitation toward possibility. For example, instead of saying, "I'm terrible at discipline," a person may begin thinking, "I'm learning how to become more consistent." That small change matters because it keeps identity open instead of fixed. The brain responds differently when change feels possible rather than impossible. Identity also influences the opportunities people allow themselves to pursue. Someone who sees themselves as worthy of success usually takes bigger risks, speaks with more confidence, and accepts opportunities more easily. Someone who feels unworthy may reject opportunities before even trying because success feels emotionally unfamiliar. This is why self-concept often shapes life direction quietly over time. Two people with similar talent can end up with completely different results because of how they see themselves internally. One believes growth is possible, while the other remains trapped in self-doubt. The difference in identity eventually creates a difference in action. Relationships are heavily influenced by identity too. People often tolerate what matches their self-image. Someone with low self-worth may accept disrespect because deep down they do not believe they deserve better. Someone with healthier self-respect sets stronger boundaries because their identity no longer aligns with constant mistreatment. Identity also changes the way people respond to failure. A person with a strong growth identity sees failure as information. They learn from it and continue moving forward. Someone with a fragile identity sees failure as proof that they are incapable. The event may be the same, but the interpretation changes everything. One of the most important things people can understand is that identity is not permanently fixed. Human beings evolve constantly. The mind adapts based on repetition, environment, emotional experiences, and daily habits. Every repeated action sends a message to the brain about who you are becoming. Small, consistent behaviors matter because they slowly reshape identity. A person who begins exercising regularly starts seeing themselves differently over time. Someone practicing honesty begins identifying as more authentic. Someone repeatedly showing courage in difficult situations gradually develops the identity of a stronger person. The process usually feels uncomfortable in the beginning because new identities feel unfamiliar. The brain often resists change at first, but familiarity grows through repetition. What once felt unnatural eventually becomes normal. Most people underestimate how much their life reflects the image they carry of themselves internally. Identity quietly influences confidence, relationships, opportunities, emotional stability, and long-term behavior. The way a person defines themselves becomes the foundation from which they move through the world. Change becomes more sustainable when it happens at the level of identity instead of surface behavior alone. Many people spend years thinking their desires are impossible simply because they cannot see evidence of them yet. They judge reality only through what is visible in the present moment. If something has not happened physically, they assume it is far away, unrealistic, or unavailable to them. But one of the most important shifts a person can make is understanding that possibility often exists long before physical proof appears. Every major achievement, invention, relationship, skill, or life change first existed as an idea, a vision, or a possibility in someone's mind before it became visible in the world. When people hear the phrase that a desire already exists spiritually or internally, it does not have to mean something mystical or disconnected from reality. It can simply mean that the potential for a different future already exists before it fully materializes. Human beings are constantly moving toward possibilities based on thoughts, decisions, habits, emotional states, and beliefs. A future outcome is often developing quietly beneath the surface long before the final result appears. Think about how a building is created. Before anyone sees the finished structure, it exists as a blueprint. The design is imagined first. The concept is formed mentally before it becomes physical. In the same way, many personal transformations begin internally long before external results become obvious. A person may internally decide to become more confident months before others notice a visible change in their behavior. The shift starts within before it appears outwardly. Most people struggle because they only trust what they can immediately see. If results are delayed, they assume nothing is happening. This creates frustration, impatience, and self-doubt. But many meaningful changes in life happen gradually beneath the surface before visible evidence appears. Learning works this way, healing works this way, personal growth works this way, even nature works this way. A seed placed underground does not immediately show visible growth, yet development is already taking place. Roots begin forming before anything breaks through the surface. If someone judged the process only by what they could see in the first few days, they might incorrectly assume nothing was happening. Human growth often follows a similar pattern. People usually underestimate how much invisible preparation happens before visible transformation. Someone developing a new skill may appear unsuccessful at first, but internally they are building experience, confidence, understanding, and discipline. Eventually, those invisible developments create visible improvement. What looked like sudden success to others was often a long internal process. The same idea applies emotionally and mentally. A person who desires a different life often begins changing internally first. Their mindset shifts, their standards change, their emotional patterns evolve. They start seeing possibilities they ignored before. Even if their external world has not fully caught up yet, something important has already started happening inside them. One reason people give up too early is because they expect immediate physical confirmation for every effort. Modern life conditions people to seek instant results, but deeper transformation rarely happens overnight. Someone may spend years carrying limiting beliefs, emotional wounds, or unhealthy habits. Naturally, creating a new internal direction takes time and consistency. The idea that desire already exists as a possibility can actually create patience and emotional stability. Instead of constantly feeling desperate or hopeless, a person begins understanding that growth is unfolding even when progress is not immediately visible. This does not mean blindly ignoring reality. It means recognizing that present circumstances are not always permanent. Many successful people describe moments when they believed in a future version of their life before they had evidence. Athletes often visualize victory long before competitions are won. Entrepreneurs believe in ideas before businesses succeed. Artists imagine creations before they exist physically. In many cases, belief and imagination come first, while physical reality follows later through consistent effort and alignment. The human mind naturally moves toward what it repeatedly focuses on, emotionally and mentally. When a person consistently imagines a healthier future, their decisions gradually begin aligning with that direction. Someone who starts emotionally connecting with the possibility of confidence may slowly take actions they once avoided. A person imagining a peaceful life may begin changing habits, relationships, or environments, supporting that vision. This process is important because internal focus influences behavior over time. What people repeatedly rehearse mentally begins affecting what feels possible to them emotionally. If someone constantly tells themselves that change is impossible, their motivation weakens. But if they begin seeing a better future as genuinely attainable, their energy and actions often shift naturally. There is also a psychological reason imagination feels powerful. The brain responds strongly to emotionally meaningful mental experiences. Studies have shown that visualization can activate similar neural pathways to physical experiences. This is why mentally rehearsing certain actions can improve performance in sports, public speaking, and other skills. The mind does not always separate imagined emotional experiences from real ones as clearly as people assume. This does not mean imagination alone replaces effort or action. Real life still requires learning, persistence, discipline, communication, and decision-making. But imagination influences the direction a person moves toward. Before someone changes externally, they usually need to emotionally and mentally accept the possibility internally first. Many people remain trapped in old realities because they emotionally identify too strongly with their current circumstances. They think their present situation permanently defines them. But circumstances often reflect old patterns, not final destiny. Human beings continuously evolve based on what they repeatedly believe, practice, and focus on. A person growing emotionally stronger may not see dramatic external changes immediately, but internally they are becoming someone different. They react differently to stress. They communicate differently. They think differently. Eventually, those internal shifts begin affecting relationships, opportunities, and life direction. This is why hope matters more than people realize. Hope is not simply wishful thinking. Healthy hope allows the mind to stay open to possibility instead of becoming trapped in limitation. The moment someone completely loses belief in growth, they usually stop trying. But when a person remains connected to possibility, they continue moving forward even during uncertain periods. The future is influenced heavily by the internal world people cultivate daily. Thoughts become decisions. Decisions become habits. Habits become lifestyle. Lifestyle shapes long-term reality. Many outcomes first exist as invisible patterns developing internally before they appear externally. The interesting part is that people often recognize this only after change finally becomes visible. Others may call it luck or sudden transformation, but internally, the process usually started long before anyone else noticed. Confidence, discipline, healing, creativity, emotional maturity, and success often begin quietly within. The possibility for a different future can exist long before physical proof arrives. That understanding helps people remain patient with growth instead of constantly doubting themselves whenever results take time. Internal change creates foundations that eventually influence external experiences. What exists mentally and emotionally today can slowly become the reality someone lives tomorrow through repeated focus, belief, action, and persistence. Doubt is one of those inner experiences that quietly slows down progress without most people realizing it. It does not always appear as something loud or obvious. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation, overthinking, second-guessing, or constantly looking for proof before taking any step forward. A person may genuinely want change, but if doubt is sitting in the background, it keeps interrupting their natural flow. It creates mental resistance that makes even simple actions feel heavier than they actually are. When someone is trying to grow or change their life, the mind naturally looks for safety. It wants certainty before movement, but life rarely offers complete certainty before action. This is where doubt becomes a barrier. It demands guarantees in situations where guarantees do not exist yet. So instead of moving forward, the person starts analyzing everything repeatedly. They think, reconsider, delay, and sometimes avoid taking action altogether. Doubt often sounds logical on the surface. It can feel like careful thinking or being realistic, but underneath, it is usually driven by fear of failure, fear of judgment, or fear of not being enough. The mind tries to protect the person from disappointment by slowing them down. It says things like, what if it doesn't work? What if you fail? Or what if this is not for you? These thoughts may feel protective, but over time they create hesitation that blocks momentum. One of the biggest effects of doubt is that it weakens emotional commitment. When a person is fully certain about something, their energy becomes focused and directed. They move with clarity, but when doubt is present, energy becomes scattered. A part of the mind wants to move forward, while another part keeps pulling back. This internal conflict drains motivation and makes consistency harder to maintain. People often underestimate how much doubt influences daily behavior. It does not only stop big decisions, it also affects small actions like speaking up, trying something new, or following through on plans. Over time, these small hesitations accumulate and create a pattern where progress feels slow or inconsistent. The person may then start believing they are not capable, when in reality, it is the doubt interrupting their natural abilities. Doubt also affects how people interpret their experiences. If someone is already doubtful, even small setbacks feel like confirmation that things will not work out. A delay becomes proof of failure. A mistake becomes proof of incapability. The mind starts collecting evidence to support the doubt even when positive signs are also present. This selective attention creates a distorted view of reality. On the other hand, when doubt is reduced, perception changes. A setback becomes feedback instead of failure. A delay becomes part of the process instead of rejection. The same situation can feel completely different depending on the level of internal doubt. This shows how powerful internal interpretation is in shaping emotional experience. Doubt often grows stronger when people are overly focused on outcomes instead of process. When attention is constantly fixed on whether something will work immediately, pressure increases. That pressure creates more uncertainty, which then feeds more doubt. It becomes a cycle where thinking too much about results actually weakens the ability to move toward them. Many people also experience doubt because of past experiences. If someone has failed before, the memory of that experience can create hesitation in new situations. The mind tries to protect them from repeating discomfort, so it becomes cautious. While this is a natural response, it can become limiting if it prevents new attempts entirely. Past outcomes start influencing future possibilities more than present potential. Another important thing to understand is that doubt does not disappear through force. Trying to fight it directly often makes it stronger because attention keeps returning to it. Instead, doubt tends to weaken when a person begins taking small, consistent actions despite it. Action creates evidence. Evidence slowly reduces uncertainty. The mind begins to adjust based on real experience rather than imagined fear. For example, someone who doubts their ability to speak confidently may still feel nervous before speaking. But if they continue practicing in small ways, the experience gradually becomes more familiar. With familiarity, doubt reduces. The person does not become confident instantly, but they begin trusting themselves more because they have evidence that they can handle the situation. This is why consistency matters so much. Consistency quietly builds trust with oneself. Every time a person follows through despite doubt, they send a message to their mind that they are capable of handling discomfort. Over time, this weakens the emotional power doubt holds. The mind starts relying more on experience than fear-based imagination. Doubt also decreases when focus shifts from perfection to progress. Many people hesitate because they feel they need everything to be perfect before starting, but perfection is rarely realistic in real-life situations. Waiting for perfect conditions often delays growth. When people accept that learning happens through doing, they become less controlled by doubt. Doubt may never completely disappear, but its influence can become much smaller over time. When a person learns to move forward with uncertainty instead of waiting for certainty, life begins to feel less restricted. Progress becomes more natural. Decisions become clearer, and the mind starts relying more on experience than fear-based assumptions about what might go wrong. Gratitude is often misunderstood as just saying thank you for what is already present in life, but in reality, it goes much deeper than that. It is not only about appreciating what is visible, but about shifting the internal focus of the mind from lack toward recognition of value. Most people live in a constant state of noticing what is missing. They think about what they do not have, what is not working yet, or what is still far away from them. This repeated focus on absence creates an emotional atmosphere of dissatisfaction, even when life already contains many things worth acknowledging. When a person begins practicing gratitude sincerely, something subtle starts to change in their perception. The mind is no longer locked only on what is incomplete. It starts noticing small details that were previously ignored. Simple things like stability, support, learning experiences, or even small improvements begin to feel meaningful. This shift in attention may seem small at first, but it slowly changes the emotional environment inside the person. Human attention is naturally selective. The mind cannot focus deeply on everything at once, so whatever it repeatedly focuses on becomes more dominant in experience. If someone consistently focuses on problems, their emotional state begins to reflect that focus. Stress feels heavier, challenges feel bigger, progress feels invisible. But when attention shifts toward appreciation, even small positive elements begin to grow in significance. Gratitude does not mean ignoring difficulties or pretending everything is perfect. Life always contains challenges, uncertainty, and moments of discomfort. Instead, gratitude allows a person to hold both awareness of difficulties and awareness of what is still supporting them. This balanced perception prevents the mind from becoming completely consumed by negativity. One of the strongest effects of gratitude is how it influences emotional stability. When someone constantly focuses on what is lacking, their emotional state often becomes unstable because satisfaction is always placed in the future. They believe they will feel better only after something changes. This creates a sense of waiting, where happiness is postponed indefinitely. Gratitude interrupts this pattern by bringing attention back to the present moment in a grounded way. For example, a person may be working toward a goal that has not yet been achieved. Without gratitude, they may feel frustrated every day because results are not immediate. But when they begin acknowledging what is already improving, even slightly, their emotional pressure reduces. They still want progress, but the journey feels less emotionally heavy. The mind becomes less reactive and more steady. Gratitude also changes how the brain interprets progress. Many people overlook their own growth because they compare themselves only to final outcomes. They do not notice how far they have already come. When gratitude is present, even small improvements become visible. This recognition builds motivation in a more natural way because it is based on real observation rather than forced positivity. Another important effect of gratitude is that it reduces emotional resistance. When a person is constantly in a state of dissatisfaction, they often resist their current reality. This resistance creates internal tension. It feels like life is something to escape from rather than experience. Gratitude softens this resistance by allowing acceptance of the present moment, even if it is not perfect. Acceptance does not mean giving up on improvement. It simply means no longer fighting reality mentally while still moving forward in life. This shift reduces emotional exhaustion. A person no longer spends all their energy on frustration and can instead direct more energy toward constructive actions. Gratitude also influences relationships. When someone becomes more aware of what they appreciate in others, their communication changes. They become less focused on criticism and more open to understanding. This does not mean ignoring problems in relationships, but it creates a more balanced emotional tone. People generally respond better when they feel seen and valued rather than constantly judged. Over time, gratitude can even influence decision-making. A person who regularly acknowledges what is already working in their life tends to make calmer decisions. They are less driven by panic or desperation. Instead of rushing into choices based on fear of lack, they approach situations with more clarity and patience. One of the deeper aspects of gratitude is how it retrains the mind to notice abundance instead of scarcity. Scarcity thinking focuses on what is missing, while abundance thinking recognizes what is already present and what is still possible. This does not mean ignoring real challenges, but it changes the emotional lens through which life is experienced. People often assume gratitude is something that must be felt only after something good happens, but it can also be practiced during uncertain times. In fact, it becomes most powerful when practiced in moments of stress or confusion. During difficult periods, gratitude does not remove the situation, but it can prevent the mind from falling into complete negativity. Another important aspect is consistency. Gratitude is not about a single moment of appreciation, but about repeated awareness. The more frequently a person shifts attention toward appreciation, the more natural it becomes. Over time, the mind begins to default less to negativity and more to balanced perception. It is also important to understand that gratitude changes internal emotional chemistry. When a person feels appreciation, the body responds differently compared to when they feel stress or frustration. Breathing becomes calmer, tension reduces, and emotional reactivity decreases. This creates a more stable internal environment that supports clearer thinking. Gratitude does not remove challenges from life, but it changes how those challenges are experienced. A stressful situation feels less overwhelming when the mind is not already filled with constant dissatisfaction. Instead of amplifying pressure, gratitude creates space for clearer responses. Many people also find that gratitude helps them stay more present. When the mind is constantly focused on what is missing, it often jumps between past regrets and future worries. Gratitude gently brings attention back to what is currently here, even if it is simple. This presence helps reduce unnecessary mental noise. Over time, this practice reshapes the way a person interacts with life. They begin to notice more positive moments that were always present but previously overlooked. Life does not necessarily change instantly on the outside, but the experience of life begins to feel different on the inside. Gratitude gradually trains the mind to see value more easily, reduce emotional resistance, and create a more balanced inner state. This inner shift influences thoughts, emotions, and behavior in ways that slowly shape a person's overall experience of life. Imagination is something people use every day without fully realizing its importance. It is not just daydreaming or random thoughts that appear in the mind. It is actually the ability to mentally experience situations that are not physically present. Every person uses imagination constantly, whether they are remembering the past, thinking about the future, or visualizing different possibilities. It is one of the most natural functions of the human mind, yet most people underestimate how powerful it can be in shaping their inner world. When someone imagines something clearly and repeatedly, the mind begins to treat that image as meaningful. The brain does not always separate vividly imagined experiences from real emotional reactions as sharply as people assume. This is why memories can feel emotionally real, even when they are only thoughts from the past. In the same way, imagined future experiences can create emotional responses in the present moment. This connection between imagination and emotion is what makes it so influential in shaping mindset. Many people spend a large part of their mental energy imagining situations they do not want. They picture failure, rejection, loss, or embarrassment before it even happens. These imagined scenarios create emotional reactions such as anxiety or fear, even though nothing is actually occurring in reality at that moment. Over time, this habit can influence how a person approaches real-life situations because their emotional state has already been conditioned by repeated mental imagery. On the other hand, imagination can also be used to create a different internal experience. When a person intentionally visualizes themselves handling situations calmly, confidently, or successfully, the mind begins to become more familiar with that version of reality. Familiarity plays a major role in human behavior. People tend to move more comfortably toward what feels familiar, even if it has not fully happened yet. For example, someone preparing for a conversation or presentation may repeatedly imagine themselves speaking clearly and staying composed. This does not guarantee that everything will be perfect, but it can influence how prepared and emotionally steady they feel. The mind rehearses scenarios internally before they happen externally, and this rehearsal can affect confidence levels. Imagination also plays a role in identity. The way a person sees themselves in their mind often influences how they behave in daily life. If someone repeatedly imagines themselves as capable, organized, or confident, even in small moments, that image gradually starts influencing their self-perception. They may begin making decisions that align more with that internal image without consciously forcing it. Many habits and behaviors are supported by imagination in subtle ways. A person trying to improve their lifestyle may imagine the benefits of staying consistent, such as feeling healthier or more energetic. That mental picture can provide motivation during moments when effort feels difficult. Without imagination, motivation often relies only on immediate circumstances, which can feel less stable. Imagination also helps people process emotions. When someone is confused or emotionally overwhelmed, they often replay situations in their mind, trying to understand them from different angles. This mental replay is a form of imagination. It allows the mind to explore possibilities, reinterpret experiences, and create understanding. In this way, imagination is not only about future thinking, but also about making sense of the present and past. However, imagination can become unhelpful when it is dominated by fear-based thinking. If a person constantly imagines negative outcomes, the emotional impact can be strong enough to affect their confidence and decision-making. The mind may begin to avoid situations not because they are truly dangerous, but because they have been repeatedly imagined in a negative way. This can limit opportunities and create unnecessary hesitation. The interesting part is that imagination does not require external conditions to change before it begins working. A person can start shifting their internal imagery at any moment. This means they can begin practicing different mental experiences even before real-life situations change. Over time, this can influence how they feel, think, and respond. When imagination is used intentionally, it becomes a tool for mental preparation. Athletes often mentally rehearse movements before performing. Speakers may imagine delivering their message clearly before going on stage. Students may visualize understanding material more easily before studying. This mental rehearsal helps create a sense of readiness because the mind becomes more familiar with the experience beforehand. Imagination also affects expectations. When someone repeatedly imagines positive outcomes, they may begin to expect better possibilities in real life. Similarly, repeated negative imagination can create low expectations. These expectations influence how people interpret events. A neutral situation can feel positive or negative depending on what the mind was already prepared to expect. Over time, imagination and experience begin influencing each other. Experiences shape imagination, and imagination shapes how future experiences are approached. This cycle means that the quality of a person's mental imagery can gradually affect their overall outlook on life. It becomes part of their internal environment. People often assume imagination is separate from reality, but in practice it plays a role in how reality is experienced emotionally and mentally. Two people can go through the same situation but imagine it differently before or during the experience, which changes how they feel about it. One may approach it with fear, while the other approaches it with curiosity or confidence. Imagination is also closely connected to creativity and problem solving. When a person imagines different possibilities, they are exploring solutions mentally before acting on them. This allows the mind to test ideas without physical risk. Many solutions in life begin as imagined possibilities before they are applied in reality. The mind naturally responds to repetition. The more often a person engages in certain types of imagination, the more familiar those patterns become. This is why repeated mental focus on certain ideas can gradually influence emotional tendencies and thought patterns. It is not about instant change, but about gradual internal conditioning. In everyday life, imagination is always active, whether people notice it or not. It shapes how situations are anticipated, how memories are interpreted, and how future possibilities are mentally constructed. Because of this, it plays a deeper role in shaping experience than most people realize. When used consciously, imagination can support clearer thinking, emotional preparation, and more confident decision-making. It allows the mind to explore possibilities before they happen and adjust internal responses in advance. Over time, this can influence behavior in ways that feel more natural and less forced, as the mind becomes more familiar with constructive internal patterns. Persistence is one of those qualities that often look simple from the outside, but in real life, it is deeply connected to how the mind handles repetition, delay, and emotional discomfort. Many people start something with enthusiasm, but as soon as progress becomes slow or results are not immediate, their energy drops. What separates long-term growth from short-term effort is not always talent or intelligence, but the ability to continue even when the mind does not feel fully rewarded yet. Persistence is what keeps a person engaged with a goal long enough for real change to develop. Most meaningful changes in life do not happen instantly. Whether it is building a skill, changing a habit, improving relationships, or developing confidence, there is usually a period where effort does not immediately show visible results. During this stage, the mind often becomes impatient. It expects quick feedback, and when that feedback does not come, doubt begins to grow. This is where persistence becomes important, because it allows a person to stay consistent even when motivation naturally fluctuates. Human motivation is not constant. It rises and falls depending on emotions, energy levels, external circumstances, and internal thoughts. If someone depends only on motivation, their actions will also become inconsistent. One day they feel inspired and take strong action, and another day they feel low and stop completely. Persistence creates stability in this cycle. It allows action to continue even when motivation is not strong. At a deeper level, persistence is closely connected to identity. A person who sees themselves as someone who does not give up will naturally behave differently than someone who believes they quit easily. Over time, repeated action reinforces identity. Each time a person continues despite difficulty, they strengthen the internal belief that they are capable of sticking with challenges. This gradually builds mental resilience. Many people underestimate how much emotional resistance appears when trying to change something in life. The mind is comfortable with familiar patterns, even if those patterns are not beneficial. When someone tries to break a habit or build a new one, the brain often reacts with resistance because it is moving away from what feels known. Persistence helps a person move through that resistance instead of stopping at the first sign of discomfort. There is also a stage in most growth processes where progress feels invisible. A person may be putting in effort, learning, practicing, or improving internally, but external results are not yet clearly visible. This stage is often where many people give up. They assume nothing is working because they cannot see immediate evidence. However, many internal changes take time before they become noticeable externally. Persistence is what carries a person through this invisible phase. Another important aspect of persistence is emotional endurance. It is not only about repeating actions, but also about managing emotional responses during challenges. When things do not go as expected, frustration or disappointment is natural. But a persistent mindset does not allow these emotions to completely stop progress. Instead, it acknowledges them and continues moving forward despite them. People often think successful individuals never struggle with doubt or difficulty, but in reality, persistence is usually built through repeated exposure to challenges. The difference is not the absence of difficulty, but the decision to continue anyway. Each challenge becomes part of the process rather than a signal to stop. Over time, this creates a stronger mental framework for handling pressure. Persistence also influences learning speed. When a person continues practicing something over time, even with mistakes, they naturally improve through repetition. Skills develop through consistent exposure rather than occasional effort. Someone who practices steadily, even in small amounts, often progresses further than someone who starts intensely but stops frequently. In many cases, progress is not linear. There are periods where improvement feels slow, followed by moments where growth becomes more noticeable. Without persistence, a person may stop just before reaching a breakthrough phase. Because they cannot predict exactly when progress will become visible, Continuing through uncertainty becomes essential. Persistence also builds self-trust. Every time a person follows through on something despite difficulty, they reinforce the belief that they can rely on themselves. This internal trust becomes important in many areas of life. When someone knows they can depend on their own consistency, they feel more confident in taking on challenges. On the other hand, stopping too early can create a pattern of self-doubt. If a person repeatedly begins things but does not continue, they may start questioning their ability to complete anything. This is not because they lack ability, but because they have not given themselves enough time to experience completion through persistence. External circumstances can also test persistence. Delays, unexpected changes, or setbacks often interrupt plans. In such moments, it is easy for the mind to assume that the effort was wasted. However, setbacks are often part of the process rather than the end of it. Persistence allows a person to adjust rather than abandon their direction completely. Another important point is that persistence does not always require extreme effort. It is not about forcing constant intensity, but about maintaining steady continuation. Even small, consistent actions can create meaningful long-term results. What matters most is staying engaged with the process rather than disconnecting from it completely. Over time, persistence shapes mindset. A person who continues through difficulties begins to see challenges differently. Instead of viewing obstacles as permanent barriers, they start seeing them as part of growth. This shift reduces fear of failure because setbacks are no longer interpreted as final outcomes. Persistence also influences emotional strength. The more a person experiences difficulty while still continuing, the more they become comfortable with discomfort. This does not mean they stop feeling challenges, but they become less controlled by them. Emotional resilience grows through repeated exposure, combined with continued action. In many real-life situations, the difference between people who succeed and those who stop is not immediate ability, but duration of effort. The ability to stay with something long enough for it to develop often becomes the deciding factor. Persistence extends the timeline of effort beyond the initial emotional resistance. It is also important to understand that persistence becomes easier when a person is connected to meaning. When someone understands why they are doing something, they are more likely to continue even during difficult phases. Without meaning, effort feels empty and becomes harder to maintain. Over time, persistence builds momentum. What once felt difficult begins to feel more natural simply because of repetition. The mind adapts to continued effort, and tasks that once required strong willpower become more automatic. This is how long-term change often develops. Persistence is not about ignoring difficulty, but about not allowing difficulty to end the process prematurely. It is the ability to stay in motion even when progress feels slow or uncertain. Through continued action, learning, and emotional endurance, persistence gradually shapes both behavior and mindset, allowing growth to develop in a steady and lasting way. Most people believe their circumstances are the main reason their life looks the way it does. They think if their environment changes, their problems will disappear, or if external situations improve, their life will automatically feel better. While circumstances do matter, they are not the full story. A deeper layer exists underneath everything people experience, and that is the inner world. Thoughts, beliefs, emotional patterns, and self-perception quietly influence how a person interprets and responds to everything happening around them. The idea that circumstances do not fully matter does not mean ignoring reality or pretending problems do not exist. It simply means that external situations are not the final authority over a person's experience. Two people can go through almost identical situations and still experience them in completely different ways because their inner state is different. One person may see an obstacle as permanent failure, while another sees it as a temporary challenge. The situation is the same, but the interpretation is completely different. Inner state plays a major role in shaping perception. When a person feels confident internally, they approach situations differently. They speak with more clarity, they make decisions with less hesitation, and they recover faster from setbacks. When someone feels insecure internally, even small challenges can feel overwhelming. The outer world is filtered through the lens of the inner world, which means perception is not purely objective. This is why people often notice patterns repeating in their lives even when external conditions change. Someone may move to a new environment, start a new job, or enter new relationships, but still experience similar emotional struggles. This happens because the internal patterns have not changed. The same thoughts and emotional responses continue to influence behavior, which eventually creates similar outcomes in different settings. Circumstances are often the surface level of experience, while internal state is the deeper structure underneath it. If the internal structure remains unchanged, external changes may not feel as meaningful or lasting. A person can improve their surroundings, but still feel dissatisfied if their inner world is filled with restlessness or lack of fulfillment. Many people wait for external conditions to change before they allow themselves to feel better internally. They think, once I achieve this, I will finally feel happy, or once things improve, I will become confident. But this creates a pattern where emotional well-being is always postponed. The present moment is always seen as incomplete, and happiness is always placed in the future. When someone begins focusing on their inner world instead of waiting for external validation, something important shifts. They start becoming more aware of their thoughts, reactions, and emotional habits. Instead of reacting automatically to circumstances, they begin observing how they interpret those circumstances. This awareness creates space for change. For example, a person facing challenges may initially feel discouraged. If they only focus on the external problem, it may seem fixed and heavy. But if they begin paying attention to their internal response, they might notice patterns like overthinking, self-doubt, or fear of failure. Once these patterns are recognized, they can begin changing how they respond internally, even if the external situation has not changed yet. This does not mean external action is unnecessary. Action is still important, but action becomes more effective when it is not driven purely by emotional reaction to circumstances. When a person is internally balanced, their actions tend to be more focused and less scattered. They are not constantly reacting from stress or panic, which allows clearer decision-making. Another important aspect is emotional resilience. When someone relies heavily on circumstances for emotional stability, even small changes in those circumstances can strongly affect their mood. But when stability is built internally, external fluctuations do not have the same level of control over emotional state. The person becomes more grounded even during uncertain situations. Inner world also influences attention. People naturally notice what aligns with their current emotional and mental focus. If someone is feeling negative internally, they are more likely to notice problems, delays, or obstacles. If someone is feeling more balanced or positive, they are more likely to notice opportunities, progress, or supportive aspects of their environment. This selective attention shapes experience more than people realize. Circumstances often feel more powerful when the inner world is reactive. In moments of stress, even small problems can feel overwhelming. But when the inner state is calm, the same problems may feel manageable. This shows that emotional interpretation plays a major role in how situations are experienced. Many life changes begin internally before they become visible externally. A person may first change how they think about themselves before their behavior changes. Then behavior changes before external results appear. This sequence often goes unnoticed because people tend to focus only on visible outcomes. But by the time results appear, the internal shift has already been happening for some time. Inner transformation also influences how people respond to setbacks. Someone with a stable inner state may see a setback as feedback or part of learning. Someone whose inner state is unstable may see the same setback as confirmation of failure. The event itself has not changed, but the interpretation changes everything. This is why focusing only on circumstances can feel limiting. If everything depends on external factors, a person feels powerless until those factors change. But when attention shifts inward, there is something that can be worked on immediately, regardless of external conditions. Thoughts can be observed, emotional reactions can be understood, beliefs can be questioned and gradually adjusted. Over time, inner change begins to reflect outwardly. As thinking patterns shift, behavior naturally follows. As behavior changes, experiences also begin to shift. This is not instant but gradual. The outer world often takes time to reflect what has changed internally. One of the most important realizations is that while circumstances influence experience, they do not fully define it. The same situation can be experienced in multiple ways depending on internal state. This gives a person more control over how they navigate life, even when they cannot immediately control everything happening around them. When the focus moves from trying to control everything externally to understanding and strengthening the inner world, life begins to feel less reactive. Instead of constantly being shaped by circumstances, a person starts responding with more awareness and stability. Over time, this creates a stronger sense of direction, regardless of external conditions. Emotional conviction is one of those inner experiences that people often confuse with simple belief or positive thinking, but in reality it runs much deeper than that. It is not just about saying something is possible or repeating affirmations in the mind. It is about the level of emotional certainty a person carries internally, even before any external proof shows up. When emotional conviction is strong, the mind does not keep negotiating with doubt every few seconds. There is a quiet sense of inner agreement, like something feels settled inside, even if the outside world has not yet changed. Most people live with fluctuating emotional states. One moment they feel hopeful, and the next moment they feel uncertain. This constant back and forth creates instability in how they approach their goals and experiences. Emotional conviction, on the other hand, is more steady. It does not mean a person never feels doubt or fear, but those emotions do not dominate their inner direction. The underlying emotional tone remains consistent enough that it guides behavior in a stable way. To understand emotional conviction better, it helps to notice how decisions are made in daily life. Many choices are not purely logical. They are influenced by how something feels internally. If something feels deeply right or aligned, a person tends to move toward it with more ease. If something feels uncertain or emotionally unstable, even if it makes logical sense, hesitation often appears. This is because emotion carries more weight in guiding action than logic alone. When emotional conviction is present, it creates a sense of internal alignment between thought and feeling. A person does not have to constantly push themselves to act in a certain way, because their emotional state is already supporting that direction. For example, someone who is emotionally convinced they are improving will continue taking steps even when results are slow, because their inner feeling already supports the idea of progress. Without emotional conviction, even small challenges can feel overwhelming. A person may start something with interest, but as soon as difficulties appear, their emotional certainty weakens. They begin questioning whether it will work, whether they are capable, or whether they should continue at all. This emotional instability often leads to stopping and starting repeatedly, which slows down long-term progress. Emotional conviction is not created instantly. It develops through repeated inner and outer experiences that gradually build trust within oneself. Every time a person follows through on something they said they would do, even in small ways, they strengthen internal trust. Over time, this builds a quieter but stronger sense of certainty that they can rely on themselves. That internal trust is a foundation of emotional conviction. Many people underestimate how much emotion influences persistence. A person may know what they want logically, but if they do not feel emotionally aligned with it, their actions become inconsistent. Emotional conviction bridges that gap. It creates a feeling that is strong enough to support action even when motivation changes. This is why some people continue moving forward even when conditions are difficult, while others stop despite having similar knowledge or ability. Another important aspect of emotional conviction is how it affects interpretation of events. When someone has strong internal certainty, setbacks do not automatically feel like signs of failure. Instead, they are processed as temporary experiences within a larger direction. This emotional framing changes how a person responds. They may still feel disappointment, but it does not completely break their sense of direction. Without emotional conviction, the same setback can feel like proof that nothing is working. The emotional meaning attached to the event becomes heavier than the event itself. This is where many people lose momentum, not because the situation is impossible, but because their emotional interpretation collapses their willingness to continue. Emotional conviction also affects how energy is used. When a person is internally uncertain, a lot of mental energy is spent on overthinking, second-guessing, and imagining worst-case scenarios. This drains focus and creates mental exhaustion. When emotional conviction is stronger, less energy is wasted on internal conflict. The mind becomes more focused because it is not constantly debating with itself. This does not mean emotionally convinced people never question things. It means their questioning does not destabilize their direction. There is a difference between healthy reflection and constant internal doubt. Reflection can lead to clarity, while persistent doubt often leads to hesitation. Emotional conviction supports reflection without turning it into paralysis. In many cases, emotional conviction is built through small evidence over time. A person starts noticing that when they take action consistently, even if results are slow, things begin to shift gradually. These small experiences accumulate internally and create a stronger sense of trust in the process. That trust slowly turns into conviction. External validation can also influence emotional conviction, but it is usually not stable on its own. If someone only feels confident when others confirm it, their emotional state becomes dependent on outside reactions. True emotional conviction develops more from internal consistency than external approval. It comes from repeatedly showing up for oneself, even when no one is watching or confirming progress. One of the subtle effects of emotional conviction is how it changes body language and presence. When a person feels internally certain, their tone, posture, and expression naturally reflect that state. They do not need to force confidence because it arises from internal alignment. Others often respond differently to this presence, not because of any performance, but because emotional state is communicated non-verbally. Emotional conviction also influences patience. When someone is not emotionally convinced, they often rush results or become easily frustrated when things take time. When conviction is stronger, there is more patience because the outcome feels internally supported even if it is not immediately visible. This reduces emotional pressure and allows more steady progress. Over time, emotional conviction becomes a stabilizing force in a person's life. It does not eliminate challenges, but it changes how challenges are experienced internally. Instead of constantly feeling uncertain about direction, there is a deeper sense of continuity. Even when situations shift, the internal feeling of "I am moving forward" remains more consistent. Building emotional conviction is less about forcing belief and more about aligning repeated thoughts, feelings, and actions in the same direction. When what a person thinks, feels, and does starts matching more often, internal certainty naturally increases. This alignment slowly creates a stronger emotional foundation that supports action even during uncertainty. In the long run, emotional conviction shapes not only how a person pursues goals, but also how they experience themselves while doing so. It changes the internal tone from hesitation to steadiness, from scattered effort to more grounded movement, and from constant doubt to a quieter sense of direction that continues even when external results are still unfolding. Detachment is often misunderstood as not caring, not wanting anything, or emotionally disconnecting from life, but in reality it is something much more balanced and mentally healthy. It is not about removing desire, it is about removing the emotional pressure that comes from needing a specific outcome in order to feel okay. Many people become emotionally dependent on results without realizing it. They attach their sense of peace, confidence, or happiness to whether something happens in a certain way, and this attachment creates internal tension. When a person is deeply attached to outcomes, their emotional state constantly fluctuates based on uncertainty. If something seems close to working out, they feel temporarily hopeful. If there is a delay or setback, they immediately feel stressed or discouraged. This creates a cycle where emotions are controlled by external progress rather than internal stability. Detachment helps break this cycle by creating space between desire and emotional dependence. A detached mindset still has goals, still takes action, and still cares about outcomes, but it does not collapse emotionally when things do not go according to expectation. Instead of needing immediate confirmation that everything is working, the person allows things to unfold without constant emotional pressure. This makes the internal experience calmer and more stable. One of the main reasons attachment creates suffering is because it narrows focus. When someone is overly attached to a specific result, their attention becomes fixed on whether that result is happening quickly enough. This narrow focus increases anxiety because every delay feels significant. Even normal pauses in progress start feeling like problems. The mind becomes impatient and starts overanalyzing everything. Detachment changes this by widening perspective. Instead of only focusing on one outcome, a person begins to see the process as a whole. They understand that progress often includes phases that are not immediately visible. This broader view reduces emotional intensity because every moment is no longer treated as a final judgment on success or failure. Another important aspect of detachment is how it influences decision-making. When a person is heavily attached, their decisions are often driven by fear. They may rush into choices because they want immediate results, or they may avoid decisions because they are afraid of losing what they want. This emotional pressure can cloud judgment and make thinking less clear. With detachment, decisions become more grounded. The person is still interested in outcomes, but they are not emotionally panicking about them. This allows for more thoughtful action. Instead of reacting to fear, they respond with awareness. This shift often leads to better long-term results because decisions are not made under emotional pressure. Detachment also plays a role in how people handle uncertainty. Life naturally contains unknowns, delays, and unexpected changes. When someone is attached, uncertainty feels threatening. The mind tries to fill the unknown with worst-case scenarios or constant worrying. This creates unnecessary mental stress even when nothing is actually going wrong in the present moment. When detachment is present, uncertainty feels more manageable. It is not necessarily comfortable, but it is not overwhelming either. The person can tolerate not knowing everything immediately without feeling like something is wrong. This ability to remain steady in uncertainty is one of the strongest emotional skills a person can develop. In relationships, attachment often shows up as emotional dependency on how the other person behaves. If attention is given, the person feels good. If attention changes, they feel insecure or anxious. This creates emotional instability because their internal state depends heavily on external behavior. Detachment in this context means maintaining emotional balance even while caring deeply about the relationship. This does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It simply means not losing oneself emotionally based on someone else's actions. A person can care, communicate, and be invested while still maintaining their own emotional stability. This creates healthier interactions because they are not constantly reacting from fear or insecurity. Detachment also influences how people experience progress toward goals. When someone is overly attached, every delay feels like failure. They may lose motivation quickly if results are not immediate. But when detachment is present, progress is seen as a process rather than a single moment. This allows patience to develop naturally because the mind is not demanding instant results. Another subtle effect of attachment is that it can create internal resistance. When a person desperately wants something, they may unconsciously create pressure around it. This pressure can make them feel tense, over-focused, or emotionally exhausted. Detachment reduces this pressure, allowing actions to feel more natural and less forced. It is also important to understand that detachment does not remove desire. Desire is still present, but it is not controlling emotional stability. A person can want something deeply while still remaining calm internally. This balance allows them to stay motivated without becoming overwhelmed by frustration or anxiety. One of the reasons detachment is powerful is because it improves clarity. When emotions are not heavily entangled with outcomes, the mind can think more clearly. It becomes easier to see what is actually happening instead of what is feared or hoped for. This clarity supports better decisions and more consistent action. Detachment also helps reduce overthinking. When someone is highly attached to a result, their mind tends to constantly analyze every detail, looking for signs of success or failure. This mental loop creates exhaustion and distracts from action. With detachment, there is less need to constantly interpret every small change, which frees up mental energy. Inner dialogue is closely connected to emotional state. Thoughts and emotions influence each other continuously. A negative thought can trigger a negative feeling, and that feeling can then generate more negative thoughts. This creates a loop that can intensify over time. Similarly, supportive or balanced thoughts can create calmer emotional states, which then allow for clearer thinking. This constant interaction shows how inner dialogue is not separate from emotion, but deeply linked to it. One of the most important aspects of inner dialogue is that it shapes interpretation. Two people can experience the same situation but interpret it completely differently based on their internal conversation. For example, one person may interpret a delay as failure, while another may interpret it as a normal part of timing. The event itself does not change, but the meaning assigned to it changes everything about the emotional experience. Inner dialogue also influences decision-making. Before a person takes action, they often have an internal conversation about whether they should proceed or not. This includes weighing possibilities, imagining outcomes, and evaluating risk. If the inner dialogue is dominated by doubt or fear, decisions may become hesitant or delayed. If the inner dialogue is more balanced and constructive, decisions tend to feel clearer and more stable. Many patterns in life are reinforced through repeated inner dialogue. If a person frequently tells themselves that they are not capable, even subtly, that message begins to influence behavior over time. They may avoid challenges, hesitate in opportunities, or feel less confident in unfamiliar situations. On the other hand, if the inner dialogue is more supportive and realistic, it can gradually build a stronger sense of capability. It is important to understand that inner dialogue is not always fully conscious. A large portion of it happens automatically based on habit and repetition. This means people often do not intentionally choose their thoughts, but still experience their effects. Becoming aware of this inner conversation is the first step toward understanding how deeply it influences experience. Inner dialogue also plays a role in memory. When a person recalls past events, they are not only remembering what happened, but also interpreting it through current thoughts. This means the same memory can feel different depending on the present internal state. If the inner dialogue is critical, past events may feel heavier. If it is more balanced, the same events may feel less emotionally intense. Another important aspect is anticipation. The mind often uses inner dialogue to predict future situations. These predictions can be helpful when they are realistic, but they can also create unnecessary stress when they are based on fear or assumption. People sometimes experience anxiety not because something is actually happening, but because of what their inner dialogue is imagining might happen. Inner dialogue also affects self-perception. The way a person talks to themselves internally contributes to how they see their identity. If the internal conversation is consistently negative, the self-image becomes weaker over time. If it is more understanding and constructive, the self-image becomes more stable. This does not mean ignoring mistakes, but it does mean interpreting them in a balanced way rather than turning them into fixed identity labels. Over time, repeated inner dialogue becomes a kind of mental habit. Just like physical habits are formed through repetition, thought patterns also become habitual. This is why certain types of thinking feel automatic for many people. They are not consciously chosen every time, but have been repeated so often that they occur naturally. Inner dialogue also influences focus. What a person repeatedly thinks about becomes what they pay attention to more often. If the internal conversation is focused on problems, the mind begins to notice more problems. If it includes awareness of solutions or possibilities, attention begins to expand in different directions. This selective focus shapes how life is experienced moment by moment. In moments of stress, inner dialogue becomes even more active. The mind tries to process what is happening by generating more thoughts. If these thoughts are uncontrolled or repetitive in a negative direction, stress can increase. If they are more grounded and reflective, stress can become easier to manage. This shows how inner dialogue can either amplify or soften emotional intensity. One of the key challenges is that most people treat their inner dialogue as absolute truth. They do not always question it. If a thought appears, it is often automatically believed. But in reality, thoughts are mental events, not fixed facts. Becoming aware of this distinction allows a person to observe their inner dialogue instead of being fully controlled by it. With awareness, inner dialogue begins to lose some of its automatic power. A person starts noticing patterns such as repeated worry, self-criticism, or overthinking. This awareness creates space between thought and reaction. Instead of immediately identifying with every thought, there is a moment of observation. That moment is important because it allows for choice in how to respond internally. Over time, inner dialogue can be gradually shaped. It does not require forcing constant positivity, but rather building a more balanced and realistic way of thinking. When thoughts become less extreme and more grounded, emotional experience also becomes more stable. This creates a healthier internal environment where reactions are less intense and more manageable. Inner dialogue is always present in some form, shaping how life is interpreted and experienced. When it becomes more conscious and balanced, it supports clearer thinking, steadier emotions, and more intentional behavior. When it remains automatic and unobserved, it continues to shape experience in the background without awareness, influencing perception in subtle but continuous ways. Repetition is one of the most powerful forces shaping human experience, yet it is often underestimated because it does not feel dramatic in the moment. It works quietly, through small repeated thoughts, actions, and emotional responses that gradually build into patterns. Most people expect change to come from big events or sudden shifts, but in reality, long-term change is usually the result of consistent repetition over time. What is repeated slowly becomes familiar. and what becomes familiar starts to feel natural, almost automatic. The mind is designed to learn through repetition. When a thought, behavior, or emotional response is repeated often enough, the brain begins to strengthen that pathway. This is how habits are formed. At first, something may feel new or uncomfortable, but after repeated exposure, it becomes easier and requires less conscious effort. This is why early stages of any change often feel difficult, while later stages feel more natural. The difficulty is not a sign of impossibility, but a sign that repetition has not yet created familiarity. Repetition affects both positive and negative patterns. If a person repeatedly thinks in a certain way, that thinking style becomes their default response. For example, if someone often focuses on problems, their mind gradually becomes trained to notice problems more quickly in different situations. If someone repeatedly focuses on solutions or learning, their attention begins to shift in that direction more naturally. The mind does not judge whether the pattern is helpful or harmful. It simply strengthens what is repeated. Emotions are also shaped through repetition. If a person repeatedly reacts with stress in certain situations, the body and mind begin to associate those situations with stress automatically. Over time, even before anything happens, the emotional response can start appearing. On the other hand, if someone practices responding with calmness or understanding repeatedly, those emotional responses also begin to feel more natural. This shows that emotional patterns are not fixed, but developed through repeated experience. One of the subtle effects of repetition is how it influences belief. A person may not consciously decide what they believe about themselves or life, but repeated thoughts and experiences gradually form internal assumptions. If someone repeatedly tells themselves they are not good at something, even casually, that message can slowly shape their self-perception. If they repeatedly experience small successes and acknowledge them, a different belief structure begins to form over time. Repetition also plays a major role in identity. People often see identity as something fixed, but in reality it is built through repeated behavior and thought patterns. If someone consistently behaves in a certain way, they begin to identify with that behavior. For example, a person who repeatedly follows through on tasks starts seeing themselves as someone who is reliable. This identity is not created instantly, but through accumulation of repeated actions. The same principle applies to negative identities as well. If a person repeatedly avoids challenges or delays action, they may begin to see themselves as someone who is not disciplined or not capable. This identity feels real to them because it has been reinforced over time. The important point is that identity is not only formed by major life events, but by everyday repetition that often goes unnoticed. Repetition also affects focus. Whatever a person repeatedly pays attention to becomes more dominant in their perception. If attention is repeatedly directed toward lack, difficulty, or comparison, those elements begin to feel more present in daily experience. If attention is repeatedly directed toward progress, learning, or small improvements, those aspects become more noticeable. The mind strengthens what it repeatedly focuses on. This is why small daily habits of thinking and attention matter more than occasional bursts of effort. A single positive thought or action may not create immediate change, but repeated consistently, it begins to reshape patterns. Over time, what once required effort starts happening automatically. This is how transformation becomes sustainable rather than temporary. Repetition also influences how people interpret their own progress. When someone repeatedly checks for immediate results, they may become impatient or discouraged if change is not visible quickly. But when they consistently engage in the process without constant comparison, they begin to notice gradual shifts that were previously overlooked. Repetition trains the mind to either expect quick results or to recognize gradual development. Another important aspect is that repetition builds comfort. The mind naturally prefers what is familiar, even if it is not ideal. This is why change can feel uncomfortable at first. New patterns have not yet been repeated enough to feel safe or normal, but as repetition continues, discomfort decreases, and the new pattern begins to feel more stable. This is how long-term change becomes integrated into daily life. Repetition also plays a role in decision-making. When a person repeatedly chooses a certain type of response, that response becomes their default. For example, repeatedly choosing to delay tasks can become a habit of procrastination, while repeatedly choosing to act immediately can build a habit of responsiveness. Over time, decisions require less conscious effort because the repeated pattern becomes automatic. In emotional situations, repetition can either stabilize or destabilize responses. If someone repeatedly reacts impulsively, emotional reactions become stronger and more automatic. If someone repeatedly practices pausing before reacting, emotional responses become more controlled over time. This shows that emotional regulation is also influenced by repeated behavior, not just intention. Repetition is also closely tied to patience. Because change happens gradually through repeated effort, impatience often arises when people expect immediate results. Understanding repetition helps shift focus from instant outcomes to consistent action. It highlights that progress is often happening even when it is not immediately visible. Over time, repetition creates momentum. What starts as effort slowly becomes rhythm. The mind and body begin to adapt to repeated actions, making them feel less forced and more natural. This is when real transformation begins to feel stable because it is no longer dependent on motivation alone, but on established patterns. Repetition shapes nearly every aspect of human experience, from thoughts and emotions to identity and behavior. It works quietly in the background, building patterns that eventually define how a person thinks, feels, and responds to life. When repetition becomes conscious, it gives a person the ability to gradually reshape those patterns in a more intentional direction, not through sudden change, but through steady and consistent continuation. Alignment is a concept that becomes important when a person starts noticing the difference between what they think they want and how they actually live internally on a daily basis. Many people focus only on external goals, like success, relationships, or achievements, but they rarely check whether their thoughts, emotions, and actions are moving in the same direction. When these three elements are disconnected, life often feels inconsistent or emotionally tiring, even if there is progress on the outside. At its core, alignment means there is a sense of inner agreement between what a person desires, what they believe, how they feel, and what they actually do. When these parts are working together, life tends to feel more steady and less conflicted. When they are not aligned, a person may feel like they are constantly pushing themselves, even for things they supposedly want. This creates internal resistance that can be difficult to understand at first. One of the clearest signs of misalignment is when someone says they want something, but their daily actions do not support it. For example, a person may say they want change, but repeatedly engage in habits that maintain the same situation. This does not happen because they are careless, but because different parts of their inner world are not moving in the same direction. One part may desire change, while another part still feels attached to familiar patterns. Alignment also involves emotions. A person might logically want something, but emotionally feel disconnected from it. In such cases, even if they take action, it may feel forced or draining. This is because emotions act as a driving force behind consistency. When emotions are not aligned with intention, effort often feels heavier. When emotions are aligned, action feels more natural, even during challenges. Thoughts play another important role in alignment. If a person repeatedly thinks in ways that contradict their goals, it creates internal conflict. For example, someone may want growth but constantly think they are not capable. This creates a split between desire and belief. Even if they take action externally, the internal conversation may reduce confidence or motivation over time. Alignment does not mean being perfectly positive or never experiencing doubt. It means that despite temporary fluctuations, there is a general direction in which thoughts, emotions, and actions are pointing. A person can still have doubts, but those doubts do not completely override their behavior. There is still movement in the chosen direction, even if it is gradual. Another important aspect of alignment is consistency. When a person is aligned, they do not feel like they are constantly switching between different internal states. Their actions are more stable over time because they are supported by both internal belief and emotional readiness. This does not mean everything is easy, but it feels less internally conflicting. Misalignment often creates exhaustion. When someone is constantly fighting against their own patterns, it takes mental and emotional energy. They may feel like they are trying very hard, but not moving forward in a satisfying way. This is often not because effort is missing, but because effort is divided internally. One part is trying to move forward while another part is holding back. Alignment also influences decision-making. When a person is aligned, decisions tend to feel clearer, even if they are not easy. There is less internal debate because thoughts and emotions are pointing in a similar direction. When someone is misaligned, even simple decisions can feel confusing because different internal signals are pulling in different directions. It is also important to understand that alignment is not something fixed. It can shift over time depending on awareness, habits, and experiences. A person may feel aligned in one area of life but misaligned in another. This is why some parts of life may feel smooth while others feel stuck. Different areas reflect different levels of internal consistency. One of the subtle signs of alignment is ease of action. When a person is aligned, they do not constantly need to force themselves into action. There is still effort, but it feels more connected to intention. When misalignment is present, even simple actions can feel like a struggle because they are not fully supported internally. Alignment also affects emotional stability. When thoughts, feelings, and actions are in conflict, emotional ups and downs become more frequent. A person may feel motivated one moment and discouraged the next. When alignment increases, emotional fluctuations still exist, but they become less extreme and more manageable. Another aspect of alignment is honesty with oneself. Many people unconsciously tell themselves they want certain things, but their deeper patterns may not fully support those desires yet. Becoming aware of this gap is not about judgment, but about understanding where internal conflict exists. This awareness is the starting point for creating more consistency. Alignment often develops gradually. It is not something that happens instantly because it involves shifting multiple layers of internal patterns. Thoughts may need to be observed more carefully, emotional reactions may need to be understood more clearly, and actions may need to be adjusted over time. As these elements begin to move in the same direction more consistently, alignment naturally increases. When alignment is present, progress tends to feel more stable. Even if results are not immediate, there is a sense that movement is happening in a coherent direction. When alignment is missing, progress can feel scattered or inconsistent, even if effort is being made. Alignment also improves focus. When internal signals are unified, attention is less divided. A person is not constantly pulled in different directions by conflicting thoughts or emotions. This allows for more sustained effort without as much internal interruption. Over time, alignment creates a sense of internal simplicity. Instead of constantly managing internal conflict, there is more clarity about direction. This does not remove challenges, but it reduces unnecessary inner resistance that often makes challenges feel heavier than they need to be. In everyday life, alignment can be seen in how naturally a person moves toward their intentions. It is not about perfection, but about consistency between inner experience and outer behavior. When this consistency increases, life tends to feel less fragmented and more coherent because the internal world is no longer working against itself in subtle but constant ways. Awareness is often spoken about as if it is something complicated or distant, but in reality it is one of the most immediate aspects of human experience. It is the simple ability to notice what is happening in the present moment, both inside the mind and outside in the environment. Most people think they are aware all the time, but much of daily life is actually spent on autopilot, where thoughts, emotions, and reactions happen automatically without much observation. Real awareness begins when a person starts noticing these automatic patterns instead of being fully controlled by them. At any given moment, there are multiple layers of experience happening. There are thoughts forming in the mind, emotions rising and falling in response to those thoughts, physical sensations in the body, and external events happening in the environment. Awareness is the ability to observe all of this without immediately getting lost in it. It creates a kind of mental space where experience can be seen more clearly instead of being fully absorbed without reflection. Most people live deeply inside their thoughts without realizing it. When a thought appears, they often become it immediately. If the thought is stressful, they feel stress. If the thought is worrying, they feel worry. This automatic identification with thoughts creates a sense of being controlled by the mind. Awareness changes this dynamic by allowing a person to notice that thoughts are happening rather than becoming completely merged with them. The same applies to emotions. Emotions arise naturally based on internal and external triggers. Without awareness, a person may fully react to every emotional wave as if it defines reality. With awareness, there is recognition that emotions are temporary states, not fixed truths. This does not mean emotions are ignored or suppressed, but they are observed as they arise and pass rather than being fully identified with. One of the most important aspects of awareness is that it creates a gap between stimulus and reaction. In ordinary experience, something happens, and the reaction follows immediately. There is very little space in between. With awareness, even a small gap begins to appear. In that gap, a person can notice what is happening before reacting. This small pause can significantly change how situations are handled. Awareness also helps in recognizing patterns. Without awareness, people often repeat the same thoughts, behaviors, and emotional responses without noticing them clearly. With awareness, these patterns become visible. A person may start noticing that they tend to overthink in certain situations, or react emotionally in predictable ways, or fall into certain habits when stressed. Once these patterns are seen clearly, they begin to lose some of their automatic control. This does not mean that awareness immediately removes patterns, but it allows them to be understood instead of unconsciously followed. Understanding is the first step toward change. When something is not seen clearly, it tends to repeat itself without interruption. When it is seen clearly, there is more possibility of responding differently over time. Awareness also influences how a person experiences the present moment. Without awareness, attention is often scattered between past memories and future expectations. The mind constantly moves between what has already happened and what might happen next. This creates a sense of mental noise and reduces connection with the present. Awareness brings attention back to what is actually happening right now, even if only briefly at first. In the present moment, there is often more simplicity than the mind suggests. Many layers of worry or anticipation are mental constructions rather than immediate reality. Awareness helps distinguish between what is actually happening and what is being imagined or projected. This distinction reduces unnecessary mental pressure. Another important aspect of awareness is that it does not require changing anything immediately. It is simply noticing. A person can be aware of a thought without trying to stop it. They can be aware of an emotion without trying to fix it instantly. This non-reactive observation creates a more stable relationship with internal experience. Over time, awareness can reduce the intensity of automatic reactions. When a person repeatedly notices their reactions instead of being fully controlled by them, those reactions begin to lose some of their dominance. This does not happen through force, but through recognition. The more something is seen clearly, the less unconscious power it tends to hold. Awareness also supports better decision-making. When a person is fully caught in reaction, decisions are often made quickly based on emotion or habit. With awareness, there is more space to consider what is actually happening. This allows for responses that are less impulsive and more thoughtful, even in simple everyday situations. In relationships, awareness can improve communication and understanding. When someone is aware of their emotional reactions, they are less likely to respond purely from impulse. They can recognize what they are feeling and choose how to express it more clearly. This reduces misunderstandings and creates more conscious interaction. Awareness also helps in recognizing internal resistance. Often people feel stuck, not because they lack ability, but because there is unseen resistance in their thoughts or emotions. With awareness, this resistance becomes visible. A person may notice hesitation, fear, or doubt more clearly instead of being completely controlled by it. This recognition allows for a more conscious response. It is important to understand that awareness is not a constant state that remains the same all the time. It naturally fluctuates. Sometimes a person is very aware, and other times they are deeply absorbed in thought or emotion. The goal is not perfection, but gradual increase in recognition. Even small moments of awareness can create meaningful shifts over time. Awareness also creates a different relationship with thinking itself. Instead of assuming every thought is important or true, a person begins to see thoughts as mental events. Some thoughts are useful, some are repetitive, and some are simply background activity. This perspective reduces unnecessary identification with every mental movement. As awareness deepens, life begins to feel less like something that is happening automatically and more like something that can be observed with increasing clarity. This does not remove challenges or emotions, but it changes how they are experienced. There is more space to notice, understand, and respond rather than simply react. In everyday life, awareness can be practiced in simple ways, such as noticing breathing, observing thoughts without judgment, or paying attention to how emotions shift throughout the day. These small moments of noticing gradually strengthen the ability to remain present and less automatically reactive. Over time, awareness becomes a foundation for understanding oneself more clearly. It does not change everything instantly, but it allows a person to see their inner world with more honesty and less confusion. From that clarity, gradual change becomes more natural because what is seen clearly is also understood more deeply. Everything we've gone through brings one simple idea into focus. The real shift never starts outside. It starts in the way you are internally experiencing life right now. Not in a forced or artificial way, but in the quiet recognition that your thoughts, emotions, attention, imagination, and identity are constantly shaping how reality feels to you before anything even changes on the surface. When you look at all these layers together, it becomes clear that manifestation is not about chasing something far away, but about understanding what is already happening within you in this moment. The way you think repeatedly, the emotions you return to, the identity you carry, and the level of awareness you operate from are all working together to shape your experience of life continuously. There is no sudden switch where everything changes instantly, but there is a gradual shift that happens when inner patterns begin to align more clearly. When attention becomes more conscious, when emotional reactions are understood instead of blindly followed, and when inner dialogue becomes more aware, life starts to feel less like something that is controlling you and more like something you are learning to understand.